In 2019, in the high desert of northern Arizona, Henry Caldwell realized something was wrong long before he understood why. He was 71, taking a slow afternoon hike along a narrow ridge, the kind of path where the wind tasted like dust and the silence felt older than the rock beneath his boots. His plan had been simple: move his legs, clear his mind, prove that his age hadn't taken everything from him. But halfway down the trail, he found someone who shouldn't have been alone out there. She was young, 24 at most, with dark braid dust on her clothes and both hands hovering protectively over the small rise of her stomach. Apache, tired, scared. "My name is Lena," she said, breath uneven. I think I'm lost." Henry answered quietly, but she wasn't listening to his words. Her gaze kept sliding past him, toward the twisted mesquite trees where the branches tangled like old scars. When he turned, he understood. Large paw prints in the sand, fresh, deep, carefully placed, like steps taken by something that moved with confidence. Mountain lion. "How long has it been following you?" Henry asked. Lena's fingers tightened on her walking stick. "Since late morning. I heard it first. Then I saw it up on the ridge. It's circling up, and I can't run for long." Her hand pressed harder against her belly. Henry felt a slow, heavy pressure settle in his chest. Not fear, but the weight of responsibility. The kind a man doesn't expect to feel again at 71. He couldn't run either. But the tracks behind them whispered the same truth. You're being hunted, and it's patient. The sky was losing its warmth. The nearest road was miles behind them. A pregnant Apache girl whose strength was fading, and an old man whose knees were already aching. Somewhere above the ridge, something shifted softly in the brush. Henry Caldwell felt the hair rise along his arms. Whatever was following them had just come closer. Henry Caldwell had spent most of his adult life believing danger was something that happened to other people. He'd raised a family, worked long years in construction, and survived the kinds of accidents that made doctors shake their heads. After retirement, he moved to quieter places, towns where the loudest noise at night was wind pushing through old fences. He thought he understood the desert. He thought he understood his limits. But that afternoon, both ideas began to unravel. Lena walked slowly beside him, each step deliberate, careful. She said she'd grown up on the reservation a few miles east, but had tried a new trail that morning, a trail she remembered her grandfather mentioning when she was a child. Something about hidden springs and old stories. She'd followed it alone, thinking it would be a simple walk. Then the cougar appeared on a distant ridge. Then her water ran out. Then the pain started low in her back, sharp enough to steal her breath. Henry listened without interrupting. He wasn't good with words, but he knew what fear looked like. It was in the way her fingers trembled when she adjusted her braid, in the way she scanned the rocks again and again, expecting movement. He checked the trail behind them one more time. Fresh prints, same direction, same spacing, same weight. A big cat, a patient cat. The desert around them felt wrong, too still, too watchful. The cliffs were turning purple with the coming evening, and every shadow seemed stretched thin, like something hiding inside it. Henry tightened the straps of his old backpack. He didn't have much: half a bottle of water, a granola bar, a roll of gauze, and a walking stick worn smooth by years of use. But he had something Lena didn't: age. Not the weakness of it, the memory of having survived things before. "We keep moving," he said, slow, quiet, and together. Lena nodded, but her eyes drifted toward the ridge again. Somewhere behind them, the silence shifted. The mountain lion hadn't lost interest. If anything, it had found a reason to come closer. Henry Caldwell had never liked the feeling of being watched. He knew it from job sites and hospital rooms, from the quiet way people studied him when he got older. But the way he felt watched now was different, older, wilder, honest in a way only the land could be. The trail curved along the side of a shallow ravine. To their left, the ground dropped into rock and brush. To their right, the slope rose into red stone and knots of mesquite. The sky had shifted from hard blue to a thin, tired gold. They had maybe 2 hours of light, less if the gray smear on the horizon kept thickening. Tell me again where you started from, Henry said. Lena walked a few steps ahead, using her stick to test the ground. Her breathing was steadier now, but he saw the stiffness in her back, the way she touched the small of it when she thought he wasn't looking. From the dirt road, she said. There's an old metal gate with no fence. I parked near that. I followed the dry creek bed and then cut onto this trail. I thought it looped back. Dry wash, Henry said. Your grandfather ever say anything about those? She almost smiled. He used to say you never trusted dry wash during monsoon season. But it's not that time of year. Henry glanced at the western sky. The smear of grey was thicker now, drifting where it didn't belong. Weather doesn't read calendars, he muttered. Lena stopped to catch her breath, one hand pressing against the small rise of her stomach. Still okay? He asked. It comes and goes, she said. The doctor said walking is good, just not too far from help. Her voice caught on the last word. We'll find that road, Henry said. You said the gate was east. I think so. Once I started hearing it, I stopped paying attention. It, he repeated. They both knew what she meant. He scanned the slope above them. Rock, brush, a twisted juniper. No movement, no sound, too quiet. Back where you saw it, Henry said. How close was it? Maybe 50 yards, Lena answered. Higher than me, above the trail, just standing there. Its tail moved once, then it walked behind the rocks and didn't come back out. Cats don't waste steps, Henry said. If it's still around, it's got a reason. They reached a narrow section where a slide had chewed away part of the path. The drop wasn't a cliff, but it was steep enough to break bones. Henry stepped in front of her and tested the footing. Gravel shifted under his boot and slithered toward the ravine. Hand on the wall, he said, one step at a time. He placed her palm against the rock face and guided her past the worst of it. His own knees burned. He ignored them. Halfway through, pebbles rattled down from the slope above. Both of them froze. A thin shower of stones scattered across the trail. Henry lifted his head slowly, searching the ledges. At first he saw only rock and shadow. Then a shape resolved where two shades of grey met. Muscular shoulders. Long tail laid still along the stone. Ears forward. Head low. Eyes a flat, watchful yellow. The mountain lion stood on a ledge 30 feet above them, balanced as if the rock had grown there to hold it. Lena's fingers dug into the wall. Don't look at its eyes, Henry said quietly. Just move. Slow. Is it going to jump? She whispered. If it wanted to, he said, we wouldn't have time to ask. Not entirely true, but it kept her feet moving. They edged along the narrow path. The cougar's tail twitched once, then again. It didn't growl, didn't bare its teeth. It simply watched, breathing slow and even. When they stepped onto wider ground, Henry risked a glance back. The ledge was empty. He felt no relief. Cats that gave up quickly didn't live long. The ones that survived were the ones that circled, waiting for the wrong step. How far along are you? Henry asked as they walked. Almost 8 months, Lena said. My grandmother says our women carry strong, but she also says we shouldn't test the spirits. Smart woman, he said. She didn't want me coming out alone, Lena admitted. I told her it was just a walk. I didn't tell her about the dreams. Dreams. Red rock, a dry wash, someone calling my name from far away. She swallowed. My grandfather used to say the land remembers us. Sometimes it calls us back when it wants something. And you listened? Henry asked. I thought it was just pregnancy anxiety, she said. I figured if I walked it once, the dreams would stop. Henry believed in weather reports and worn maps, not omens, but something about the way she said it made the air feel thicker. Next time it calls, he said, ask it to send better directions. This time her smile lasted. They walked in silence for several minutes, their boots crunching on gravel. The grey on the horizon had darkened into a shallow band. The air along the ravine grew cooler. Wind's changing, Henry said. Good or bad? Lena asked. In a place like this? He shrugged. Depends on who's using their nose. The trail forked ahead. One branch climbed toward the ridge, following the tops of the cliffs. The other dipped lower, curving toward a pale line of sand marking the dry wash. Lena pointed toward the lower path. "I think my car is that way, near where it widens." "Wash is quicker," Henry said, "but if that sky opens up, all the water comes through there first." He nodded at the ridge. "Higher ground slower. Safer if it rains." Lena chewed her lower lip. "I don't want to be out here in the dark, not with it following us." He didn't either. His legs were tired. His breathing had gone shallow on the steeper sections, but he pictured brown water roaring through the wash. "We take the ridge," he said. "If the clouds blow past, we can cut back down later." She nodded reluctantly. The climb was gentle at first, then steeper. Sand gave way to rougher stone. Henry's thighs burned. Once he had charged up slopes like this with 50 pounds of tools. Now he counted steps in his head, giving himself small goals between larger rocks. "Do you have family?" Lena asked after a while. "2 kids," he said. "Both grown. Both somewhere else. And you hike alone?" "Some people buy sports cars," he said. "I buy decent boots." She made a small sound that might have been a laugh. "My father used to hike with me," she said, "before he got sick. He said the land listened more when our footsteps were the only noise. After he died, I stopped coming, until the dream started." The trail narrowed again, pinching them between a wall of rock and open air. Henry kept himself between Lena and the drop. Below, the dry wash twisted away toward a cluster of pale boulders. Something moved near those boulders. Several mule deer picked their way along the wash, ears flicking. They grazed with easy, careless motions, pausing now and then to lift their heads. "Deer," Henry said. "That's either a good sign or a bad one." "How can deer be bad?" Lena asked. "If they're that calm," Henry said, "either nothing's hunting them, or whatever is hunting is saving its energy for something else." As if on cue, one deer froze, staring toward a bend Henry couldn't see. The others snapped still. Then they exploded into motion, bolting down the wash, hooves striking stone, white tails flashing. Lena's hand closed around his arm. "Did it see us?" "I don't think we're the main interest out here," Henry said. Whether that comforted him, he wasn't sure. The first cool drops of rain touched the back of his neck a minute later, light and scattered. The wind now smelled faintly of wet dust and something sharper. Far behind them, from somewhere in the maze of stone and shadow, a sound rose and faded. Not a roar, just a low, rough call that seemed to fold itself into the rocks. The mountain lion was still there, still tracking, still deciding. Rain in northern Arizona didn't always come as a storm. Sometimes it began as a suggestion. Thin drops whispered across stone, barely enough to darken the dust. But for Henry Caldwell, even those first drops meant something had shifted. The desert never wasted warnings. He paused beneath a shallow outcrop and let Lena catch her breath. She sat on a flattish slab of sandstone, one hand braced behind her, the other pressed to her lower back. Her face was pale beneath the dust. "How's the pain?" Henry asked. "It's manageable," she said, though her jaw tightened, as if the truth hurt more than the contraction. "I think it's just the walking. And the fear." "Fear's normal," Henry said. "Means your brain still wants you alive." Lena managed a thin smile before closing her eyes again. Her breathing slowed into careful patterns, the kind he'd seen women use in maternity classes decades earlier. Henry crouched near the opening of the overhang, scanning the slope, the wash below, the ridge above. Rain collected on the brim of his hat and slid down the back of his neck. No movement, but the silence had weight, a kind of pressure he felt along the backs of his arms. Predators changed the atmosphere when they were close. "You said your grandfather led you here once?" Henry asked, keeping his voice steady. Lena nodded without opening her eyes. "I was 10. He said this trail was part of an older path, something used long before any maps were drawn. He believed certain places held memory, that the land itself remembered people." Henry exhaled through his nose. "My dad used to say the land didn't remember anything. It just waited for you to forget your footing." "That's not a bad way to die," Lena whispered. "On land you respected." Henry shook his head. "I don't feel like dying today." She opened her eyes then, dark, unfocused for a moment, then sharpening on him. "Neither do I," she said. Thunder grumbled far away, too distant to be threatening yet. But the grey smear on the horizon had grown teeth, darker edges, thicker clouds bleeding into one another. "We should keep moving," Henry said, "slow and steady." He offered her his hand. She took it, and he pulled her gently to her feet. Her balance wavered for a second, then steadied. They climbed higher, following the ridge as it curved around a broad sweep of land. The trail bent between weathered pillars of red sandstone. Wind funneled through the gap, carrying the smell of wet dust and juniper. Lena paused again. "Did you hear that?" Henry listened. Nothing. Then something soft. A scrape or just rain brushing the wrong surface. "Probably just the wind," he said, though the hair rose on the back of his neck. The path narrowed once more. Henry stepped first, testing each patch of ground with his stick. His boots slipped on damp sand, and he steadied himself with one hand on the rock wall. Lena followed closely behind, leaning on her stick, her breath growing unsteady again. "You all right?" he asked over his shoulder. "It's just the slope," she said. "And the weight. And the everything." Henry's chuckle was low. "That's honest, at least." They continued upward until the trail leveled beside a ledge that overlooked the wash far below. The view stretched for miles, waves of stone, lonely juniper trees, and the familiar pale ribbon of the dry creek bed twisting like an old scar through the land. "We're getting closer," Lena said. "That curve down there, it looks familiar." Henry squinted. "Could be. Hard to tell at this height. Your car might be just beyond that bend." Thunder rolled again, louder now. The temperature dropped. Wind whipped across the ridge, carrying a fine spray of rain. Lena wrapped her arms around herself. "We won't make it if the wash floods," she said. "If we go down too early." "We won't," Henry said. "We choose the moment." He scanned the landscape again. Then he froze. A shape moved along the wash, half hidden by pale boulders. Not deer this time, not shadows. Something heavier, lower to the ground, muscles rippling beneath tawny fur. The mountain lion padded across the wash with quiet confidence, head low, tail relaxed. It paused at a cluster of rocks, lifted its nose and scented the air. It turned its head toward the ridge where they stood. Lena followed his gaze and inhaled sharply. "It sees us," she whispered. "Maybe," Henry said. "Maybe not." But he knew the truth. Cats weren't stupid, and they didn't forget. Slowly, the cougar stepped into the open. It was big, bigger than any Henry had seen in decades. Shoulders broad, body lean, every movement coiled with controlled grace. It walked a few paces, then stopped, its eyes locked on the ridge. Henry felt Lena grip his arm. "What do we do?" she asked. "We keep moving," he said. "Higher. As long as we're above it, we've got options." "Can it climb this ridge?" "Better than we can." Her breath hitched. "But it won't," Henry added. "Not unless it's convinced we're worth the effort." "And are we?" Henry didn't answer. They continued along the ridge, leaving the wash behind as the trail curved deeper into clusters of stone. The cougar didn't follow immediately, but Henry never let it out of his awareness. Every decision he made was shaped by the question, where would it move next? The land changed ahead. The trail narrowed again, this time into a split path between two rock formations. One side offered a steep scramble up loose gravel. The other dipped into a shallow bowl ringed by high walls. Henry stopped. "We need to think about this." Lena wiped rain from her forehead. "What do you mean?" "Two choices," Henry said. He pointed to the left. "Up there, steep, slippery. Safe if we make it, but if either of us falls..." She nodded grimly. He pointed to the right. "Down there, flat for a bit. Good for your breathing. But if the cat's circling..." He hesitated. "Hairball like that is a trap." Lena pressed her hand to her stomach again. "I don't know if I can climb that slope." Henry stared at the rising path. His knees were already aching. His breath felt heavy in his chest. He wasn't sure he could manage it either. A gust of wind swept through the rocks, carrying a sound, a low, rough cough. Not aggressive, Not loud, but close. Too close. Lena's eyes widened. Henry raised a hand for silence. The cough came again, just beyond the rocks. The cougar was above them. It got ahead of us, Lena whispered. Smart cat, Henry said. Rain thickened. Drops struck stone in sharper rhythms. Storm clouds dragged across the sky, bruised and heavy. We go down, Henry said suddenly, into the bowl. But you just said, I know, but if it's above us, that climb is suicide. In the bowl there are rocks, cover, places to hide if we need to. Hide, she repeated. Temporary, Henry said. We'll move through fast. Lena didn't argue. She trusted him now in that instinctive way people trust someone who keeps fear from turning into panic. They descended into the shallow basin. The rock walls rose around them in rough layers, red, then orange, then pale streaks of sandstone. Rain ran along the grooves in the stone. Henry looked for tracks, for loose debris, for any sign something else had been there. Then he saw it, a single paw print, deep, fresh, pressed into a patch of wet sand, sheltered by a ledge. Lena saw his face and stopped. Is that— Yes, Henry said. It was here, she whispered. Not long ago. Another cough echoed above, louder this time, closer. Then a scrape of claws on stone. Henry grabbed her shoulder. Move, now. They hurried across the basin, boots splashing through shallow puddles forming on the rock. The air trembled with another cough, this one sharper, carrying a hint of frustration. He's testing distance, Henry said, trying to see how tired we are. They reached the far side of the bowl where the rock sloped upward again, forming a narrow exit between jagged pillars. Lena squeezed through first. Henry followed and froze. A shadow slid across the stone behind them. A long, low silhouette stepped into the bowl framed by rain. The cougar. It moved with that terrible calm, tail swinging in slow arcs. Its ears were forward, its eyes locked onto them. Curious, hungry, but not desperate. Not yet. Henry, Lena whispered. I see it. The cat stepped forward. Henry raised his walking stick, not like a weapon, more like a boundary marker. You don't want this fight, he murmured. The cougar paused, head tilting. Then, one slow step closer. Henry felt his heartbeat pound behind his ribs. Go, he whispered to Lena. Up the path. Don't run. Just go. She hesitated. You? I'll be right behind you. Another cough. The cougar's muscles tightened. Not a jump, not yet, but a test. Henry stepped back into the narrow exit, shielding Lena with his body. The cat followed. The storm finally broke overhead, rain falling in earnest. Henry Caldwell realized something then, something cold and absolute. The mountain lion wasn't tracking them anymore. It was closing in. Rain thickened, running off the rock in thin streams and turning the ledge under Henry Caldwell's boots slick and darker than before. Hand on the wall, he told Lena. Don't hurry. Just don't stop. She climbed a few steps ahead of him, shoulders tense, one hand gripping the rock, the other pressed against the small of her back. Her breathing came in shallow pulls. It's starting again, she said quietly. The pain? He asked. She nodded. In my back. And around the front now. Tell me when it eases, Henry said. Out loud. I need the timing. She shut her eyes, breathed through her teeth, and waited. After several seconds, she let out a long breath. Okay. It passed. Henry filed the moment away. Pain that came and went like that wasn't just fear anymore. Below them, gravel slid. The cougar had left the basin floor. It climbed the opposite side in a rising line, choosing boulders that brought it steadily closer to their level. It moved as if the rain meant nothing, claws finding purchase on surfaces Henry wouldn't have trusted. The trail bent along the wall in a narrow crescent. To their right, the drop fell into broken rock and scrub. To their left, the stone rose in wet plains, streaked with darker lines where water had cut paths over the years. Another gust of wind pushed strips of rain across Henry's face. When he blinked it away, he saw the cougar clearly for the first time at their height. It stood on a ledge 20 feet away, almost level with them. Up close it looked heavier than he'd expected, shoulders thick, chest deep, paws as large as his hands. Its tail moved in slow arcs behind it. Its ears were forward. Its eyes were calm. Lena looked back over her shoulder and froze. "Don't stop," Henry said. "2 more steps, then you can stop." She forced herself to move those 2 steps, pressed against the wall, and then clung there, one hand white-knuckled on a ledge of rock. Henry eased around her until his body blocked hers from the cougar's direct view. The ledge was just wide enough for his boots. He set his back to the wall and faced the animal. The cougar watched him, head slightly lowered. Rain darkened its coat along the spine. It took one slow step forward, placing its paw with deliberate care, weight balanced. Henry lifted his walking stick. He didn't shake it, didn't jab it. He held it across his body like a narrow fence, wood steady between his hands. "Easy," he murmured. "You don't want this, old man, tired girl. Too much trouble." The cat's eyes tracked the movement of the stick. Its whiskers twitched. A low sound vibrated in its chest, more a warning to itself than to him. "Henry," Lena whispered behind him, "it's closer than before." "I know," he said. "Keep your shoulder on the rock. If I tell you to move, you go sideways, not up. Understand?" "Yes," she breathed. The cougar crouched a little, muscles tightening under wet fur. Henry felt his heart thudding against his ribs, hard and uneven. He drew in a breath that tasted like wet stone and fear, and stepped forward. The ledge seemed even narrower now. He brought the stick up, then struck down hard at the rock in front of the cougar's paws. The crack of wood on stone exploded between the walls. The cougar flinched, ears flattening. Its front paws slid half an inch. Its tail lashed once. Henry didn't back up. "Hey!" he shouted, voice rough and loud in the confined space. He stepped into the sound, putting his weight behind the noise the way he used to behind a hammer swing. For a moment he felt almost young, not in body, but in that stubborn place inside that refused to yield. The cougar hesitated. It wasn't fear, it was calculation. The animal weighed risk against reward, hunger against effort, rain, height, noise, an old man who did not step aside. Its muscles eased, just slightly. It shifted its weight backward, paws searching for a safer place to land. Henry struck the rock again. The stick bounced, the vibration almost knocking it from his hands. Pain flared in his wrists. He ignored it, keeping his gaze locked on the cat. The cougar dropped to a lower shelf in one smooth bound. It didn't run, but its body angled now toward the slope instead of the ledge. It stared at him for a long second, ears still flat, breath quickening just enough to fog in the cooler air. Then it turned, tail flicking, and slipped behind a cluster of boulders, vanishing as if the rock had swallowed it. Henry watched the gap until he was sure it wasn't about to reappear. Only then did he let himself turn back to Lena. Her face was wet with rain and something else. She clung to the rock with both hands, shoulders shaking. "Is it gone?" she asked. "For now," he said. His hands trembled. He tightened them until his knuckles creaked. "We made it more trouble than we're worth. That buys us time." She closed her eyes and pressed her forehead to the wall. A breath later, her body stiffened again. "It's starting," she whispered. "How soon after the last one?" Henry asked. "I don't know. A few minutes. Less than before." She rode the contraction silently, knuckles going white again. When it passed, she sagged. "Okay," Henry said quietly. "That's getting too regular for my liking." He looked ahead. The ledge widened after another short stretch, bending toward a low saddle between 2 higher ridges. Beyond that, the land might open enough to show the road, or at least an idea of where it lay. "If we reach that saddle," he said, "we might see your car. Or I might see the best line to get you there. Either way, it's better than standing on this strip with a cat that hasn't entirely lost interest." "And if it comes back?" she asked. "Then I yell at it again," he said, "and you keep walking." A weak laugh escaped her. It broke halfway into a breathless sound that might have been a sob. "My grandfather used to say something about lions," she said. "He seems to have had a lot to say," Henry replied. "He said they look for more than weak legs. They listen for hesitation. If your heart falters, they know." Henry thought of the way his heart had stumbled the last time he climbed steps too fast, of the pills lined on his kitchen counter. of how alive it felt now, pounding hard, forced to remember its job. "We don't let it hear that then," he said. "Not today." He helped her move again, guiding her feet over the slick stone. Side by side, they followed the ledge toward the saddle, carrying with them the echo of his shout, the memory of yellow eyes in the rain, and the fragile, stubborn decision to keep going while they still could choose it. The saddle looked closer than it truly was. From a distance, it seemed like a small dip between two ridges, just a gentle rise, and then a clean path downward. But as Henry Caldwell and Lena drew closer, the land revealed its tricks, slopes steeper than they appeared, rocks looser, turns narrower. The desert hid difficulty inside simplicity. It always had. Lena's breathing was uneven now. She paused more often, one hand bracing against the stone, the other clutching her walking stick. Henry stayed close behind her, steadying her elbow whenever her balance shifted. "How long since the last one?" he asked. 6 minutes, she guessed. "Maybe 7. They're not strong yet. Just tight." "That's good," Henry said. "Means we still have time." She nodded, though her eyes carried a fear she didn't voice. Rain continued in thin sheets, not heavy enough to flood, but enough to follow every crack in the stone. Water gathered in tiny rivulets that trickled along the trail and pooled in grooves carved by years of storms. When they reached a wider section of the ridge, Henry allowed them both a short rest. Lena sank onto a flat rock, closed her eyes, and lifted her face to the cool rain as if trying to gather strength from the air itself. He scanned the land below. The wash twisted through the valley like a pale ribbon, vanishing around a bend. Beyond that, a line of darker terrain marked where the land sloped toward the main road. If her car was anywhere, it would be somewhere past that bend. "Henry," Lena said suddenly, her voice thin. "Look!" She pointed toward the wash. Henry followed her finger, and his stomach tightened. The cougar was visible again, far below, moving along the wash bed. It wasn't chasing them. It wasn't stalking directly. It was simply following the lowest path through the land, cutting distance the way predators did, quiet, efficient, with no wasted motion. "It's going toward where the wash widens," Lena whispered. "Toward my car." Henry didn't answer immediately. Predators didn't think in human ways, but they understood patterns, they understood paths, and they learned quickly. If Lena had been near her car when she first saw it, the cat might remember that area as part of her scent trail. "We keep going," Henry said softly. "If it reaches the wide wash first, we need to be ahead of it, not behind." They moved again. The trail narrowed but angled upward, climbing toward the saddle. Lena's contractions returned, mild, then easing, then mild again. Each one slowed her steps, but she still moved with a quiet determination that surprised Henry. "You're doing better than most people would," he said. She huffed a soft laugh. "Most people aren't being chased by a lion while 8 months pregnant." "You'd be surprised," Henry said. "Life gets creative sometimes." Halfway up the last incline before the saddle, her foot slipped. She gasped, caught herself against the stone, and immediately pressed her hand to her abdomen. "Is it the baby?" Henry asked quickly. "No, just a sharp one. It's gone now." But she looked pale, too pale. He took her walking stick and wedged it more firmly under her hand so she could use it as a brace. "One step at a time," he said. "Don't look ahead, just your feet." She did exactly that, placed her foot, breathed, placed the next, breathed again. When they finally reached the saddle, Henry felt relief wash through him like cool air. The land opened into a wider, flatter area. Sagebrush dotted the ground. Rocks lay scattered like forgotten tools. And to the south, barely visible through the thin rain, was the faintest glint of metal. "Your car," Henry breathed. Lena followed his gaze. Her eyes widened. "Yes, yes, that's it." The vehicle was far, maybe a mile away, but in sight. The trail wound downward in a long curve, some parts steeper than others, but all reachable. "We can make that," Lena whispered. "We can," Henry agreed, "but carefully." Thunder rolled again, closer now, vibrating through the stone beneath their boots. Henry felt it in his knees. Before they took another step, Lena gripped his arm. "Henry," she said quietly, eyes fixed somewhere behind him. "Don't turn fast. Just look." He shifted slightly and followed her gaze. Across the saddle, on the far ridge, stood the cougar. Not close, not charging, simply watching them from a rise of rock, its body still, its tail hanging low, its head raised. The distance between them was long, but not impossible for a determined animal. Lena's breath caught. It found the high ground. "It's studying us," Henry said, "seeing if we're slowing down." "Are we?" she asked. Henry's legs trembled from exertion. His lungs ached. His wrists hurt from gripping the walking stick. Lena's contractions were coming more frequently now, though still irregular. "We're fine," he said. It wasn't entirely true. The cougar moved, taking slow steps along the opposite ridge, matching their position like a shadow. "We're going downhill," Henry said. "That's good. We can outpace it if we don't panic. Downhill is easier," she said, "unless we slip." "Then we don't slip." They began the descent. Rain made the path slippery. Henry walked slightly behind and to Lena's left, ready to grab her if she faltered. The ground softened in some spots where sand collected. In others, sharp rock jutted out like teeth, but the trail widened enough that he felt a little safer. For 20 minutes they worked their way downward. Then a contraction hit Lena so suddenly she had to stop. She clung to Henry's arm, breath hissing between her teeth, body bent slightly forward. "Time it," she said through clenched jaw. Henry did. It lasted longer than the others. When it finally eased, she straightened slowly. "That one hurt," she whispered. "We're getting close," Henry said. "We just keep moving. Your car is right there." But before they could take 3 more steps, a sound rose from the slope ahead. Not thunder, not wind. A low rolling growl. The cougar emerged from a cluster of juniper trees directly below them. Henry stopped instantly, pulling Lena behind him. The cat wasn't charging, but it wasn't keeping distance anymore. It walked along the trail, tail lifted, shoulders rolling in a calm, predatory rhythm. "How did it get ahead of us?" Lena whispered. "It took a different path," Henry said. "Shorter. It knows the land better than we do." The cougar paced forward, head low. Not a leap, not a test. A message. Henry lifted his stick again. "Hey!" he shouted, voice echoing down the slope. "Back!" The cat slowed, but didn't turn. Lena inhaled sharply. "Henry!" "Stay behind me," he said. The cougar lifted its paw and tapped the ground once. A soft, deliberate motion. Henry understood. It wasn't trying to scare them. It was claiming the path. And they needed that path. A gust of wind blew cold rain across his face. Then Lena whispered, voice trembling, "Henry, my water just broke." He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He felt the air change. He felt the urgency shift from danger to something deeper, heavier, unstoppable. The cougar took one more step forward. Henry tightened his grip on the stick. Between the girl behind him and the animal in front of him, he knew exactly where he belonged. "Lena," he said softly. "Listen carefully." She swallowed. "I'm listening. When I tell you to move, you go around me. You go left. You keep your eyes down and you don't stop." "What about you?" she whispered. Henry's voice was steady, almost calm. "I'll make sure it stays with me." The first thing Henry Caldwell thought was that the timing couldn't be worse. The second was that it didn't matter. Rain tapped on stone. Lena stood behind him, one hand clamped on his arm, the other over her belly. He felt a faint tremor run through her. "Bad?" he asked without turning. "It's warm," she whispered. "A lot. And the cramps are sharper." "How far apart?" "I don't know. I stopped counting when I saw it." The cougar paced a few yards down the trail, blocking the line toward the distant glint of metal that was Lena's car. Its body had dropped lower, shoulders bunching with each slow step, tail moving in a tight curve. Henry set one foot ahead of the other, walking stick-angled across his body. "If it comes," he said quietly, "it'll come fast. You won't outrun it, but you might outturn it." "That's not comforting," she murmured. "Wasn't meant to be." Her grip tightened. "I don't want you to—" "You want to see your kid?" he asked. A small, broken laugh escaped her. "Yes." "Then you do exactly what I say." Wind pushed another sheet of rain across the slope. The cat blinked, then fixed its gaze on them again. Henry studied the ground between them. The trail sloped, then dropped where gravel had piled near the edge. To the left, rocks formed a broken wall. To the right, the land fell into scrub and stone. "Okay," he said, "there's a gap by those rocks. When I move, you go there. Stay low. Don't run." "And if it chases me instead of you?" she asked. "That'll be my failure, not yours." He didn't give her time to argue. He stepped forward and brought the walking stick down hard on a flat stone. The crack echoed off the ridges. "Hey!" he shouted. "Here, look at me!" The cougar's head snapped up. Its eyes locked on him. Its ears flattened. Henry advanced 2 steps, making himself as large as he could. He raised the stick again and slammed it down. The cat's tail lashed. "Now," he said. "Left. Go." He didn't turn to see if she moved. He walked toward the cougar, each step measured, stick up, throat burning with the force of his own shout. "Come on!" he roared. "You want something? Take me!" The trail narrowed. Gravel shifted under his boots. He planted them wide, bracing. The cougar lowered itself, muscles rippling. Its lips peeled back a fraction. It took 3 quick steps forward, then stopped as if testing the distance. Thunder rolled overhead. The cat flinched, but didn't retreat. Henry saw wet fur clumping along its shoulders, the scar on one ear. He planted the stick again and shouted, not words this time but sound, deep, dragged from somewhere older than language. The cougar had to decide. It decided. With a sudden explosive movement, it lunged. Henry barely had time to drop the stick across his body. Impact hit like a truck of muscle and bone. His back slammed into the ground. The sky flipped. He heard Lena scream his name. The cat's paw raked across the stick, claws scraping wood and skin. Pain flared along his forearm where a claw caught flesh through his sleeve. Not deep, but enough to jolt him. He drove the end of the stick upward, wedging it under the cougar's chest, forcing space between them. For a second they locked there. Old man on his back on wet rock, predator above him. Both shaking with effort. Thunder cracked closer. Rain came harder, turning the stones slick. The cougar's paws slid. The stick shifted under its weight, then jammed against a rock. The cat slipped sideways, claws scrabbling near the edge of the trail. The slope dropped steeply there. Henry twisted, shoving with the last strength in his arms and shoulders. The cat lost its footing. For a heartbeat it hung there, claws grabbing at nothing. Then it dropped, sliding down the slope in a spray of mud and stones. It crashed onto a lower ledge and bolted downslope, disappearing into scrub with a furious yowl. Henry lay still, chest heaving. Rain washed across his face. His arms shook so hard he could barely keep the stick in his hands. "Henry!" Lena's voice closer now. "Henry!" "I'm here," he managed. He rolled onto his side and pushed himself to his knees. Pain burned along his forearm. His shoulder throbbed. But he was alive. Lena knelt beside him, one hand on her belly. "You're bleeding," she said. He glanced at his arm. Thin lines of red, mixed with rain, already fading to pink. "It's nothing," he said. Kat barely signed the guest book. She laughed once, then winced as another contraction hit. Her hand flew to her abdomen. He timed it in his head. When it eased, she sagged. "They're closer," she whispered. "Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe less." "We're out of time," Henry said. "That thing might circle back, and you're not staying pregnant out here much longer. We move. Now." "You can still walk?" she asked. "Can you?" he countered. She nodded. Then yes. They picked their way down the slope, moving as quickly as they dared on wet stone. Henry's shoulder protested every step. His arm ached, but his legs held. Every few minutes, Lena stopped, gripped his arm or a rock, and breathed through another tightening that left her pale. The glint of metal below grew slowly larger. "Almost there," Henry said. At last the trail widened into flatter ground, sloping toward a patch of scrub and packed dirt. Lena's car sat there, small and rain-speckled. She made a sound between relief and a sob. "There," she whispered. "Grandfather, thank you." They reached the car. Lena fumbled in her pocket and dropped the keys. Henry picked them up and unlocked the doors. "Back seat," he said. "Lie on your side. If anything happens before we reach town, that's safer." "You're driving?" she asked. "Unless your insurance demands someone younger," he said. Her laugh broke into a sharp breath as another contraction gripped her. He helped her into the back, shoved his backpack in beside her and shut the door. Then he slid behind the wheel. "Hospital?" he called. She gave him the name of one in the nearest town. He started the engine. As they bounced along the dirt road, the wash beside them began to fill with water. A thin, muddy flow that thickened as the storm deepened. Henry kept one eye on the road and one on the wash. "Still with me?" he called. "Still here," she answered. "They're close now." "The contractions." "Good," he said. "Means you're stubborn. Stubborn people make it." He drove faster than he liked on the wet dirt, slowing only for bad ruts and sharp turns. The desert blurred past. Juniper, rock, the faint line of the ridge where a cougar had finally decided one hard meal wasn't worth the risk. When the first distant lights of town appeared through the rain, Henry Caldwell exhaled a breath he hadn't known he was holding. They hadn't escaped the desert. They'd just lived long enough for it to let them go. The nurses moved quickly when Henry Caldwell carried Lena through the hospital doors. Within minutes, she was taken to a room, placed on monitors, surrounded by calm voices speaking in practiced tones. Henry stood just outside, soaked in rain, clothes streaked with dust, one sleeve torn where the cougar had caught him. When the doctor finally stepped out, Henry braced himself. "She's fine," the doctor said, "and the baby is too. Early but strong." Something in Henry's chest loosened. His knees nearly gave out. They let him see her once everything settled. Lena looked exhausted, hair damp with sweat, but her eyes held a quiet strength. "You didn't have to do all that," she murmured. "Yes," Henry said softly. "I did." She reached out and took his hand. "My grandfather used to say the land doesn't choose who saves you. It just shows you who's willing." Henry didn't believe in omens, but he believed in moments like this, moments where breath still filled your lungs even when it shouldn't have. Outside, thunder rolled one last time across the desert, drifting away with the storm. Henry Caldwell listened to the fading sound and finally allowed himself to breathe. Sometimes survival isn't about strength. It's about the people who refuse to leave your side when everything turns dark. Tell me in the comments, what moment in your life reminded you that you weren't alone?